very urgent. Your soulmate is saying, "Please open this before I give up, I can't do this anymore." Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, because sometimes the loudest cries for understanding are never spoken out loud. They don't arrive with dramatic announcements. They don't come through impossible signs or mysterious events. Instead, they live quietly inside someone's heart, hidden behind everyday routines, polite smiles, and ordinary conversations. For a long time, your soulmate had been carrying thoughts they couldn't easily explain. Not because they wanted to hide them. Not because they enjoyed pretending everything was fine. But because they believed silence might protect everyone involved. And listen to this. Each morning began the same way. The sun slowly rose above the horizon. The world came alive with familiar sounds. People hurried to work. Neighbors greeted one another. Coffee shops filled with quiet conversations. Everything appeared completely ordinary. Yet inside their heart, another day began with the same unanswered questions. Should I finally speak? Should I wait a little longer? Will honesty bring people closer, or create more distance? Those questions quietly followed them through every part of the day. Because your heart needs this right now, because the hardest conversations often begin long before a single word is spoken. Your soulmate carried those questions with patience. And listen to this. At first, they convinced themselves there was no hurry. Tomorrow would be a better day. Next week would feel easier. The perfect opportunity would eventually appear. The perfect words would somehow come naturally. But tomorrow quietly became another tomorrow. Days turned into weeks. Weeks slowly became months. The waiting never truly ended. Instead, the weight inside their hearts slowly became heavier. Not because the situation grew worse. Because unspoken feelings have a way of growing louder the longer they remain hidden. Because your heart needs this right now, because silence sometimes protects us for a moment, but honesty often creates the opportunity for deeper understanding. Your soulmate slowly realized that. And listen to this. One peaceful afternoon, they decided to step away from every distraction. No phone. No endless notifications. No background noise. Only a quiet walk through a nearby park. The breeze moved gently through the trees. Children laughed as they played. Birds crossed the bright afternoon sky. An elderly couple walked slowly together, smiling without saying very much. Watching those ordinary moments reminded them of something beautiful. The strongest relationships are rarely built through dramatic moments. They grow through countless ordinary days. Simple conversations. Patient listening. Small acts of kindness. Promises quietly kept. Because your heart needs this right now, because meaningful relationships are strengthened by consistency rather than grand gestures. Your soulmate reflected deeply on that lesson. And listen to this. As they continued walking, memories quietly returned. Not memories of extraordinary achievements. Not moments of great success. Instead, they remembered the conversations that changed them. Someone saying, I'm proud of you. Someone admitting, I was wrong. Someone choosing forgiveness instead of anger. Someone offering encouragement when it was needed most. Those moments had never made headlines. Yet they had quietly shaped an entire life. Because your heart needs this right now, because simple words spoken with sincerity often leave the deepest impact. Your soulmate smiled gently. And listen to this. They eventually found an empty bench beneath a large tree and sat quietly, allowing themselves to think without rushing. The afternoon sunlight filtered softly through the branches. The peaceful surroundings invited reflection. For the first time in many days, they stopped asking themselves what everyone else expected. Instead, they asked something much more personal. Am I living according to the values I truly believe in? That question lingered. It refused to disappear. The answer wasn't immediate. But another realization slowly emerged. They wanted to become someone who valued honesty more than comfort. Someone who chose conversations over assumptions. Someone who expressed appreciation before opportunities passed by. Because your heart needs this right now, because our values quietly shape every important decision we make. Your soulmate understood that more clearly than ever. And listen to this. As evening approached, the sky slowly transformed into beautiful shades of gold, orange, and violet. Watching the sunset reminded them that every day eventually comes to an end. Every opportunity has its season. Every relationship requires care. Every meaningful connection deserves attention before distance quietly grows. That thought didn't create panic. It created gratitude. Gratitude for every chance to choose kindness while the opportunity still exists. Because your heart needs this right now, because appreciation becomes most meaningful when it is expressed instead of assumed. Your soulmate carried that gratitude home. And listen to this. Later that evening, they opened an old notebook that had quietly become a trusted place for reflection. Instead of writing about fears, they decided to write about what truly mattered. I want to choose honesty, even when it feels uncomfortable. I want to listen before making assumptions. I want to appreciate people while they are still part of my journey. I want my actions to match my words. I want kindness to guide my decisions more often than fear. Reading those sentences slowly filled their heart with unexpected peace. Not because every problem had disappeared, but because they finally understood the kind of person they wanted to become. Because your heart needs this right now, because clarity often begins with understanding our own values before trying to change someone else's. Your soulmate quietly embraced that truth. And listen to this. As night settled over the world, they stood beside the window watching the stars appear one by one. Everything outside had become still. The silence no longer felt heavy. Instead, it felt peaceful. For the first time in a long while, they realized something important. The words, "I can't do this anymore," were never really about giving up on another person. They were about giving up on fear. Giving up on endless hesitation. Giving up on pretending that important conversations could wait forever. Instead, they wanted to begin choosing honesty, patience, empathy, and courage. One conversation at a time. One ordinary day at a time. Because your heart needs this right now, because meaningful relationships become stronger when people replace assumptions with open, respectful communication. Your soulmate held on to that hope. And listen to this. Before turning off the light, one final realization gently settled into their heart. The greatest burden wasn't uncertainty. It was believing that silence was the only safe choice. Real strength isn't found in hiding our thoughts forever. It's found in speaking with kindness, listening with empathy, and allowing honesty to create understanding. Those words stayed with them long after they closed their eyes. Not as proof that a hidden soulmate is literally sending you a final message before giving up, but as a fictional, inspirational reminder that healthy relationships grow through sincere conversations, patience, compassion, and mutual respect, not through fear or silence. Because your heart needs this right now, because every meaningful relationship has the opportunity to grow stronger when people choose openness, humility, and kindness. Your soulmate drifted to sleep with a calmer heart than they had felt in many weeks. The future remained unwritten. The answers had not all arrived. But they finally believed that choosing honesty over fear was the beginning of something far more meaningful than endless waiting. This message is for you, because after that long evening of reflection, something quietly changed inside their heart. Not because every answer suddenly became clear. Not because every fear disappeared overnight. Not because life suddenly became simple. But because they realized they could no longer keep carrying the same emotional weight while pretending everything was fine. For so long, they had convinced themselves that silence was the safest option. Silence couldn't be misunderstood. Silence couldn't start uncomfortable conversations. Silence couldn't create conflict. At least, that's what they believed. But over time, another truth slowly revealed itself. Silence wasn't protecting their heart anymore. It was exhausting it. Because your heart needs this right now, because avoiding important conversations often creates heavier burdens than facing them with kindness. Your soulmate slowly understood that lesson. And listen to this. The next morning began before sunrise. The world was quiet. Only the soft sound of birds welcomed the new day. They sat beside the window holding a warm cup of coffee, watching the sky slowly change from darkness to light. For several peaceful minutes, they said nothing. They simply watched. And while the first rays of sunlight touched the horizon, another thought gently entered their heart. I've spent so much time waiting for the perfect moment that I've almost forgotten why this matters so much. That realization surprised them. Because suddenly the focus wasn't on fear anymore. It was on what they truly valued. Honesty. Respect. Understanding. Compassion. Those values suddenly felt much more important than uncertainty. Because your heart needs this right now, because when we remember our values, difficult decisions become easier to understand. Your soulmate quietly embraced that truth. And listen to this. Later that morning, they walked through familiar streets that somehow looked different. The same cafes opened their doors. The same neighbors exchanged greetings. The same children laughed on their way to school. Nothing outside had changed. Yet inside, everything felt different. Instead of wondering what everyone else expected, they began asking themselves, "What kind of person do I want to be?" That question stayed with them throughout the day. Not because it demanded an immediate answer. Because it quietly reshaped every decision they made afterward. Because your heart needs this right now, because the most important choices often begin with deciding who we want to become. Your soulmate reflected deeply. And listen to this. As the afternoon unfolded, they noticed something they had overlooked for a long time. People weren't perfect. No one always knew the right words. Everyone made mistakes. Everyone misunderstood something at some point. Everyone carried invisible struggles. That realization softened their heart. Instead of expecting flawless conversations, they began appreciating sincere ones. Instead of expecting perfect understanding, they valued genuine effort. Because your heart needs this right now, because authentic relationships are built through grace, not perfection. Your soulmate smiled quietly. And listen to this. Later that day, they found themselves sitting beneath a large tree in a peaceful park. The gentle breeze moved through the leaves. Sunlight filtered softly onto the path. Children played nearby while older couples walked slowly hand in hand. Watching those ordinary moments reminded them of something simple. The happiest people didn't seem to have perfect lives. They simply appreciated the people beside them. They listened. They laughed. They forgave. They chose patience. Again and again. Because your heart needs this right now, because lasting happiness often grows from everyday acts of kindness rather than extraordinary events. Your soulmate carried that thought home. And listen to this. As evening approached, they opened the notebook that had become their quiet companion during this season of reflection. Instead of writing fears, they wrote questions. Have I been honest with myself? Have I appreciated the people who matter? Have I allowed fear to speak louder than love? Have I chosen assumptions when conversations were possible? Each question invited deeper reflection. None of them were easy. Yet every one of them felt necessary. Because your heart needs this right now, because honest questions often become the beginning of lasting growth. Your soulmate slowly found clarity. And listen to this. As darkness settled outside, another realization gently entered their heart. The words, "I can't do this anymore," were never really about giving up on another person. They were about giving up on endless hesitation. Giving up on pretending that emotions don't matter. Giving up on believing that important conversations can wait forever. Instead, they wanted to begin choosing courage. Not loud courage. Quiet courage. The courage to listen. The courage to apologize. The courage to forgive. The courage to express appreciation before opportunities disappear. Because your heart needs this right now, because courage is often quiet, gentle, and deeply compassionate. Your soulmate felt lighter than they had in many weeks. And listen to this. Before going to bed, they stood beside the window watching the stars slowly fill the night sky. The world outside had become peaceful. Inside their heart, the constant noise had finally begun to settle. They no longer believed they needed perfect certainty before moving forward. They simply wanted to live according to the values they believed in. Honesty, kindness, patience, empathy, respect. Those values became their compass. Because your heart needs this right now, because when our values guide us, fear no longer has to lead the way. Your soulmate quietly trusted that truth. And listen to this. Before closing the notebook, they wrote 5 final reminders. Speak with kindness. Listen without rushing to judge. Express gratitude while there is still time. Choose conversations instead of assumptions. Remember that trust grows through consistent honesty. They slowly read each sentence again. For the first time in a long while, peace replaced pressure. Not because every question had been answered, but because they finally knew the direction they wanted to follow. And that made all the difference. Because your heart needs this right now, because clarity doesn't always mean having every answer, it often means knowing which values will guide your next step. Your soulmate closed their eyes with quiet hope. Tomorrow remained unwritten. The future was still unfolding. Yet they believed something beautiful had already begun. Not a dramatic ending. Not a mysterious revelation. But a quieter transformation. A heart choosing openness over fear. Understanding over assumptions. Compassion over pride. And honesty over silence. Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, because after many restless nights, countless unanswered questions, and moments when silence felt easier than honesty, your soulmate reached a place they never imagined possible. Not because every problem suddenly disappeared. Not because every fear magically faded away. Not because someone arrived with all the answers they had been searching for. But because something inside them quietly transformed before anything around them did. And listen to this. The morning arrived wrapped in complete stillness. Before the rest of the world had fully awakened, they sat beside the window, watching the first light slowly spread across the horizon. The sky shifted from deep blue to soft gold. Birds welcomed another day without worrying about yesterday. The breeze gently moved the leaves outside. Everything in nature seemed to know exactly where it belonged. Watching that peaceful scene made them wonder why human hearts often struggle so much with uncertainty. Perhaps life wasn't asking them to know every answer. Perhaps life was simply asking them to take the next honest step. Because your heart needs this right now, because growth often begins when we stop demanding certainty and start choosing courage. Your soulmate quietly reflected on that thought. And listen to this. As they prepared for another ordinary day, they realized how much energy they had spent imagining conversations that had never happened. They had replayed old memories. Imagined different outcomes. Wondered how people might respond. Created countless possibilities inside their mind. Yet none of those imagined conversations had brought peace. Only real honesty had the power to do that. That realization gently settled into their heart. Because your heart needs this right now, because peace is rarely found inside endless overthinking, it is often found through sincere action. Your soulmate finally understood that lesson. And listen to this. Walking through the familiar streets, they noticed something different. Nothing around them had changed. The bakery still opened at sunrise. The cafe still welcomed early visitors. Neighbors still greeted one another with friendly smiles. Children still laughed as they walked toward school. Life continued moving exactly as it always had. Yet somehow everything looked more beautiful. Not because the world had changed. Because gratitude had quietly changed the way they looked at it. Because your heart needs this right now, because when gratitude grows, ordinary moments begin to feel extraordinary. Your soulmate smiled without even realizing it. And listen to this. Later that afternoon they visited a quiet park where they often went whenever they needed to think. They sat beneath a large tree whose branches had stood through countless seasons. Spring blossoms. Summer warmth. Autumn leaves. Winter winds. The tree remained steady through every change. Looking at it, another thought entered their heart. Strong relationships grow the same way. Not because every season is easy, but because both people continue showing up through every season. Through misunderstandings. Through difficult conversations. Through moments of joy. Through seasons of waiting. Because your heart needs this right now, because lasting trust is built through consistency rather than convenience. Your soulmate quietly treasured that realization. And listen to this. For several peaceful minutes they simply watched people passing by. A father patiently teaching his child to ride a bicycle. Friends laughing together on a nearby bench. An elderly couple walking slowly, matching each other's pace. A stranger helping someone pick up groceries that had fallen onto the sidewalk. None of those moments were dramatic. None of them would appear in the news. Yet every one of them quietly reminded your soulmate that love often speaks through ordinary kindness. That realization filled their heart with hope. Because your heart needs this right now, because kindness often changes lives without ever asking for recognition. Your soulmate carried that hope with them. And listen to this. As evening approached, they returned home and opened the notebook that had become their trusted companion during this season of reflection. This time they didn't write fears. They didn't write questions. Instead, they wrote everything they had learned. Waiting forever doesn't create clarity. Honest conversations require courage. Listening carefully is just as important as speaking honestly. Forgiveness often brings greater peace than holding on to disappointment. Kindness is never wasted. Reading those words slowly brought unexpected comfort. Not because life had become predictable, but because they finally knew what kind of person they wanted to become. Because your heart needs this right now, because understanding who we want to become often matters more than knowing exactly what tomorrow will bring. Your soulmate quietly embraced that truth. And listen to this. As darkness slowly settled outside, they remembered every person who had quietly shaped their life. The teacher who believed in them. The friend who listened without judgment. The family member who always answered the phone. The stranger whose unexpected kindness arrived exactly when it was needed. Looking back, they realized something beautiful. Life is changed less by extraordinary miracles than by ordinary people consistently choosing compassion. That thought brought tears to their eyes. Not tears of sadness. Tears of gratitude. Because they realized they had been surrounded by quiet acts of love all along. Because your heart needs this right now, because gratitude often reveals blessings we overlooked while searching for bigger answers. Your soulmate's heart overflowed with appreciation. And listen to this. Before bedtime, they stood beneath the night sky. Thousands of stars stretched across the darkness. The world had grown quiet. The worries that once felt overwhelming now seemed much smaller than they had before. Not because every challenge had disappeared, but because their perspective had changed. Instead of asking, "What if everything falls apart?" they quietly asked, "What if choosing honesty is already the beginning of something better?" That single thought replaced fear with hope. Because your heart needs this right now, because hope often begins with one courageous decision to live according to our values. Your soulmate believed that more than ever. And listen to this. Before turning off the light, they wrote one final promise across the last page of their notebook. I will stop waiting for perfect circumstances. I will choose honest conversations with kindness. I will appreciate people before opportunities pass. I will listen with patience. I will trust that every act of sincerity strengthens the relationships that truly matter. They slowly closed the notebook. A peaceful smile appeared. Not because the future had become certain, but because they finally understood the path they wanted to follow. A path guided by integrity instead of fear. Compassion instead of assumptions. Hope instead of hesitation. Because your heart needs this right now, because every meaningful journey begins with one sincere step taken in the direction of truth. Your soulmate quietly rested in that peace. And listen to this. Before sleep finally arrived, one last realization settled gently into their heart. The words, "I can't do this anymore," were never about giving up on love. They were about giving up on fear, silence, and endless hesitation. The strongest relationships are not built by perfect people. They are built by ordinary people who keep choosing honesty, patience, forgiveness, and understanding, even when those choices are difficult. Those words stayed with them as they closed their eyes. Not as proof that a hidden soulmate is literally sending a final message, but as a fictional, inspirational reminder that meaningful relationships grow stronger through open communication, empathy, gratitude, and everyday acts of kindness. Because your heart needs this right now, because every sincere conversation has the potential to replace fear with understanding, distance with connection, and uncertainty with hope. Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, because after every sleepless night, after every quiet prayer whispered into the darkness, after every moment of wondering whether silence was safer than honesty, after every lesson that slowly reshaped their heart, your soulmate finally reached the moment they had been moving toward all along. Not because every question suddenly had an answer, Not because every fear disappeared overnight. Not because life became perfect. But because they realized something that completely changed the way they looked at everything. The greatest battle had never been with another person. It had been inside their own heart. And listen to this. For a long time, they believed peace would come only after every problem was solved. They imagined a future where there would be no misunderstandings. No uncertainty. No difficult conversations. No fear of being vulnerable. But life gently taught them something different. Peace isn't always found after the storm. Sometimes peace begins while the storm is still passing overhead. Sometimes peace begins the moment we stop fighting our deepest values and finally decide to live by them. Because your heart needs this right now, because lasting peace is often created by the choices we make within ourselves, not by perfect circumstances around us. Your soulmate quietly embraced that truth. And listen to this. The following morning arrived with a calm they hadn't felt in a very long time. Sunlight slowly filled the room. The familiar sounds of birds echoed outside the window. The world looked exactly the same as it had the day before. Cars moved along the streets. People hurried to work. Neighbors greeted one another with warm smiles. Nothing extraordinary had happened. Yet everything felt different. Not because the world had changed. Because they had. The fear that once filled every quiet moment no longer controlled every thought. Instead, there was space for gratitude. For patience. For hope. Because your heart needs this right now, because true transformation often begins quietly, long before anyone else notices it. Your soulmate smiled gently. And listen to this. Later that morning, they decided to revisit every lesson they had learned throughout this journey. They remembered the days they waited for perfect timing. The evening spent replaying conversations. The countless moments of hesitation. The fear of saying the wrong thing. The hope that tomorrow might somehow make every decision easier. Looking back, they realized none of those days had been wasted. Every moment of uncertainty had taught patience. Every unanswered question had developed wisdom. Every difficult emotion had strengthened compassion. Even the waiting had become a teacher. Because your heart needs this right now, because life's most difficult seasons often prepare us for our greatest growth. Your soulmate appreciated every lesson. And listen to this. That afternoon they returned once more to the peaceful park that had become a place of quiet reflection. The familiar bench still rested beneath the old tree. Children laughed nearby. The breeze carried the gentle sound of leaves moving above them. An elderly couple walked slowly together, smiling as though they had shared thousands of ordinary days just like this one. Watching them, another realization quietly appeared. Lasting love is rarely built through dramatic moments. It grows through ordinary mornings. Shared conversations. Patient listening. Gentle forgiveness. Small acts of kindness repeated over many years. Those simple moments become extraordinary because they are chosen again and again. Because your heart needs this right now, because meaningful relationships are strengthened through consistency more than grand gestures. Your soulmate held that thought close. And listen to this. As the afternoon slowly faded into evening, they opened the notebook that had accompanied them throughout this season of reflection. This time, they didn't write about fear. They didn't write about uncertainty. They didn't even write about decisions. Instead, they wrote about gratitude. I'm grateful for every lesson that made me wiser. I'm grateful for every challenge that taught me patience. I'm grateful for every conversation that reminded me to listen. I'm grateful for every person who chose kindness when I needed it most. I'm grateful that honesty still has the power to build trust. Reading those words brought tears to their eyes. Not tears of sadness. Not tears of regret. But quiet tears of thankfulness. Because they finally realized that even difficult seasons can leave behind beautiful gifts. Because your heart needs this right now, because gratitude often reveals blessings that were hidden inside life's hardest chapters. Your soulmate felt their heart becoming lighter. And listen to this. As twilight covered the sky, they stood beside a peaceful lake. The surface reflected the colors of the sunset like a painting. Gentle ripples spread across the water. Watching those ripples reminded them of something they would never forget. Every small decision creates another ripple. One honest conversation. One sincere apology. One patient response. One act of forgiveness. One expression of gratitude. Those moments travel much farther than we ever realize. Long after we forget the conversation itself, people often remember how we made them feel. Because your heart needs this right now, because kindness has a way of continuing long after the moment has passed. Your soulmate quietly treasured that truth. And listen to this. As darkness settled across the sky, they understood something that had once seemed impossible. The words, "I can't do this anymore," were never truly about giving up. They were about refusing to continue living with fear as the loudest voice in their heart. They no longer wanted hesitation to control every important decision. They no longer wanted silence to replace honest communication. They no longer wanted assumptions to take the place of understanding. Instead, they wanted something different. A life built on truth. Respect. Compassion. Patience. Grace. Because your heart needs this right now, because healthy relationships flourish when people choose openness instead of fear. Your soulmate finally believed that completely. And listen to this. Returning home for the evening, they opened the notebook one final time. Across the last page, they carefully wrote 5 promises they hoped would guide every chapter still waiting to be written. I will choose honesty, even when it feels uncomfortable. I will appreciate the people who matter while I still have the chance. I will listen with empathy before responding. I will forgive more quickly than I judge. I will remember that every ordinary act of kindness strengthens the relationships that truly matter. They slowly read each promise again. Each sentence felt like the beginning of a new chapter. Not because life had become easier. Because they had become stronger. Because your heart needs this right now, because growth is measured not by the absence of challenges, but by the wisdom we carry through them. Your soulmate quietly accepted that truth. And listen to this. Before turning off the light, they stood beside the window one last time. Thousands of stars stretched across the peaceful night sky. The silence no longer felt lonely. It felt comforting. Inside their heart, one final realization gently settled. A realization they knew would remain with them for the rest of their life. The greatest decision I ever made wasn't choosing between different futures. It was choosing the kind of person I wanted to become. Someone who values honesty more than comfort. Someone who chooses conversations over assumptions. Someone who offers compassion before judgment. Someone who understands that trust is built through thousands of ordinary moments, not one extraordinary day. Those words became the quiet ending to one chapter. And the hopeful beginning of another. Not because every problem had disappeared, but because fear no longer had the final word. Hope did. Kindness did. Integrity did. Because your heart needs this right now, because every meaningful relationship grows stronger when people continue choosing patience, honesty, forgiveness, gratitude, and sincere communication, even when those choices require courage. Your soulmate closed their eyes with complete peace. The future remained unwritten. Tomorrow would still bring new challenges. New opportunities. New conversations. But they were no longer afraid of what tomorrow might hold. They trusted that every step taken with honesty and compassion would always lead them toward something meaningful. And before sleep gently arrived, one final message remained in their heart. Not a prediction. Not a hidden revelation. Simply a timeless reminder. Choose honesty before convenience. Choose understanding before assumptions. Choose gratitude before regret. Choose forgiveness before resentment. Choose kindness before pride. Because the strongest relationships are never built by perfect people, they are built by ordinary people who keep choosing love, respect, empathy, and truth, one ordinary day at a time.